Hello, everyone. I'm Tanya Rivero. Thank you for joining us. It is official. Joe Biden is now the Democratic nominee for the President of the United States. The former vice president and his wife, Jill, celebrated at a school where she used to teach in Delaware following a virtual roll call. They were surprised by their grandchildren, who threw streamers at them. CBS News political correspondent Ed O'Keefe is in Wilmington, Delaware, with a recap of night 2.
Delaware is proud to cast its 32 votes for our favorite son and our next president.
Our friend, Delaware's Joe Biden.
A roll call like no other last night as Democrats from Maine to the Northern Mariana Islands, Georgia to Guam, Washington, D.C. to Washington State officially nominated Joe Biden. The former vice president and his wife Jill celebrated with their grandchildren at a Wilmington, Delaware high school, where Jill once taught. It was there that she later spoke on behalf of her husband and acknowledged that many teachers like her are struggling with how to work during the pandemic.
You can hear the anxiety that echoes down empty hallways.
Biden said her husband would carry the nation forward in its time of need.
How do you make a broken family whole? The same way you make a nation whole. With love and understanding. And with small acts of kindness.
Mr. Biden has called himself a bridge to the future of the Democratic Party. And the night highlighted rising stars.
In every election, we choose how we will create a more perfect union.
And the party's former leaders.
Joe Biden must be our next president.
Former President Bill Clinton delivered his most stinging attack to date against President Trump.
At a time like this, the Oval Office should be a command center. Instead, it's a storm center. There's only chaos. Just one thing never changes: his determination to deny responsibility and shift the blame.
And yet again, Democrats gave airtime to Republicans, like former Secretary of State Colin Powell.
With Joe Biden in the White House, you will never doubt that he will stand with our friends and stand up to our adversaries, never the other way around.
And Cindy McCain, the wife of the late Senator John McCain, who narrated a video about how her husband and Biden worked together.
Was a style of legislating and leadership that you don't find much anymore.
There was also a focus on issues like health care, with one video featuring activist Adi Barkan, who suffers from ALS.
After I was diagnosed, the president passed a tax bill that put my health care at risk. So I went to Washington, D.C.
Barkan lost his voice from the disease.
Everyone living in America should get the health care they need, regardless of their employment status or ability to pay.
The Democratic convention moves into the third day with another lineup of high-profile speakers. Among them, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Hillary Clinton, former President Barack Obama, and now vice presidential nominee Kamala Harris. For more on this, I want to bring in Caitlin Huey-Burns and Tim Perry. Caitlin is a CBSN political reporter, and Tim is a CBS News campaign reporter. Welcome to both of you. Caitlin, let me start with you. Will you break down last night's convention for us? What were your main takeaways from night 2?
Well, the party and Joe Biden's campaign wanted to present two things. One, they wanted to portray Biden as an empathetic figure, one that can handle a pandemic and a big recession. And two, that the Democratic Party is big and inclusive, and that inclusivity includes Republicans. We saw Republicans featured in prime time. Colin Powell, who has been supporting Democratic candidates for a while now, but served in the Bush administration, also heard a tribute to John McCain and his relationship with Joe Biden. That was a real theme that Democrats want to show, because they want to show Biden as someone who can build consensus. And we saw that they also want to send a message that while Donald Trump wants to paint Democrats with a broad socialist brush, that Biden is someone who can be able to build consensus and kind of bring multiple factions together. Now, that might be a pipe dream kind of a view, but that's what they were trying to portray. And what we heard from Jill Biden, who would be the first lady if the Biden ticket is elected, she was talking about her experiences as a teacher. She came live from a classroom, and this is kind of to speak to an audience at home that's really wrestling with this anxiety of whether to send their kids to school in the fall. Childcare is a huge issue as well, and trying to really speak to what's on the hearts and minds of regular viewers at home who are less concerned with internal party dynamics and more concerned with their own bottom lines and these decisions that they have to make.
So, Tim, I want to ask you about last night's virtual roll call for Biden's formal nomination. Was a virtual roll call as effective, as how we usually see a convention with a packed arena?
The word I would actually use is efficient. Normally, when you see these roll calls take place on the convention floor, they can take hours and hours, and it's normally when you see the delegates from all 57 states and territories roll off the number of delegates that each candidate will be getting. And so last night we saw virtually, since during the pandemic they couldn't go to Milwaukee, we saw them all in their home states. We saw party activists, we saw party leaders, we saw different politicians list off the amount of delegates that Joe Biden or that Bernie Sanders would be getting. And it was also a very good sign of unity. People from all across the country, like I said, were coming together to show their support for the candidates and to clinch Joe Biden the nomination.
And Caitlin, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez spoke very briefly last night to formally nominate Bernie Sanders. Now, this caused some confusion. People weren't quite sure why she was speaking for Sanders, but to be clear, she has endorsed Joe Biden. Caitlin, for people who don't quite know how this process works, can you explain what went on there?
That's right. She has endorsed Joe Biden, and she took to her social media accounts to make that clear afterwards, because there was some confusion just because the audience at home isn't used to these convention rules that say that you have to show the support for whoever reached a certain delegate threshold, and that's what Bernie Sanders did. So that's what she was trying to do there. Heading into the night, there was some concern among some of the more progressive members of the party that people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and some of these rising stars weren't given the kind of big features that people like Bill Clinton were given, and also people like Colin Powell and Republicans have been given. And there's a really interesting dynamic going on in the party right now where you are seeing this kind of unifying behind Joe Biden. It was notable that Bernie Sanders helped to lay out the agenda, what he described as what Biden's agenda would be moving forward, showing a cohesive party. But at the same time, we've had several primaries in which you've seen candidates who are the insurgent types of progressive candidates defeating, or at least coming really close to defeating, longtime Democratic incumbents. And I've asked, party activists and party leaders about this dynamic, given that Joe Biden ended up being the nominee in the most diverse and biggest field that Democrats have ever had. And they said the primary for president was all about defeating Donald Trump. And in these down ballot races, there is an opportunity in some cases for some in the party to show where they want the party to go. And that's what we've seen in some of these recent congressional races.
And Tim, Kamala Harris will give her historic address tonight. What are you hearing from the campaign about what she might discuss?
So the campaign's being very tight-lipped about what we'll hear tonight, but we know a few things. We know that Senator Harris will be using her story and her own life as a way to reflect the different lives of a lot of the Democratic base. And let's remember, Senator Harris is the daughter of two immigrants, a mother from India, a father from Jamaica. She is an HBCU grad, and these are all things that the campaign thinks will excite the base. And so we can expect to hear a lot of stuff about that. And I was looking back at her 2012 DNC speech that she delivered when she was just the newly elected Attorney General of California. And that's a lot of what she spoke about then. She spoke a lot about her mother, Kamala Harris, and when she first became a homeowner. Another thing that we can probably expect to hear her talk about is Joe Biden's Build Back Better plan. The country is facing three different crises, a crisis on policing with people of color, a crisis with the COVID pandemic, and also a crisis with the economy. And, you know, in the latest CBS Battleground Tracker, 14% of people said that they didn't want to hear too much about Donald Trump and Mike Pence, but what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris could do for voters. And, you know, as I say that, I'll also mention the vice president pick is normally going to be someone who goes and attacks the incumbent, and that's something that we should expect to see her do. She did it at her opening speech when she was first announced as Joe Biden's running mate, and we should probably expect to see her do that again tonight.
And Caitlin, what will you be watching for tonight?
Well, this will be the first time that a lot of voters are introduced to Kamala Harris in this type of setting. And as Tim outlined so well, this is a historic night for her. Former President Obama is also going to be speaking. But what I'm watching for from the two of them is how much they focus on this big issue that we've all been talking about, and that is voting rights. We've been talking a lot about all of these barriers that exist in normal times for a lot of people to vote. But now that we're in a pandemic, this has put a lot of strain and caused some anxiety about how voters will cast their ballots in November. So this is a big issue that we've heard people talk about. Michelle Obama referenced it a little bit earlier in the week, but I'm watching to hear what Obama and Harris have to say about this issue of voting rights.
All right. Well, Caitlin Huey-Burns and Tim Perry, thanks to both of you for joining us. We really appreciate it.